As students settle into a new school year, families are facing new challenges: school safety, attacks on curriculum, and harmful speech from staff. We want to give parents and students a little help here to maneuver through this new climate in the education system, not just in your city, but really all around the country. So joining me now is Dr. Elon Dancy. He is the Helen S. Faison Endowed Chair in Urban Education. He's also the Executive Director of the Center for Urban Education at the University of Pittsburgh. Dr. Dancy, thanks so much for joining me. I want to start by getting your take on a couple things. Let's start with an update to a story that we brought the audience last week from Flagler County, Florida. Last month, 2 black teachers at Bunnell Elementary School led a presentation. I want to stress again, these are black teachers. And they led a presentation talking to 4th graders and 5th graders who had underperformed on standardized tests. Now, the students were also black. The teachers told students that those with high scores had a good chance of going to college, and those who had low scores were more likely to go to jail, to get shot, or to get killed. We've learned since then that one of the teachers who led that assembly has resigned. But Doc, whether they resign or not for me ain't the point. How do you make sense of that kind of a situation?
Yes, Mark, thanks first for having me here. It's great to see you. I think I make sense of that within what Sadia Hartman might call the afterlife of slavery, that we still have to grapple with the ways that education are sites within the afterlife of slavery and are sites of anti-blackness, and that no one is actually impervious to anti-blackness, not even black people. So when I hear you mention the kinds of issues that we're seeing in this case with discourse, with a heavy reliance on scores, without an understanding about how what is normalized within schools, what are normal standards within schools are anti-black, is not surprising to me. So I think we have to understand schools as remaining sites for anti-blackness, which is to say that they continue to reproduce.
That's an important point that you raised there, right? Because you're saying anti-blackness, because the first thing people are going to say is, well, the teachers are black. But your point that teachers, even black teachers, can be anti-black is an important one. What do you say to the folk who say, yeah, but those test scores do tell a story, and people who don't do well on the tests often get pushed out of school, they end up in jail, they do end up getting shot, they do end up vulnerable. What do you say to people who say they're just trying to scare these kids straight?
Yes, what I say to that is that scores actually are not neutral, but scores actually are a reflection of the disparate and different resources that we have actually had access to over our histories, and that scores actually do not teach us about the states of learning that actually disregard Black histories, the histories of this country, or the communal and collective ways that we need to learn.
I keep thinking about what it would mean to be a 4th or a 5th grader, finding out that because you bubbled in C instead of B, that you're now more likely to die, that you're more likely to end up in a cage. You know, I mean, it's scary business to me. But let's move on to another story, because in Virginia, parents are suing a school district over the district's anti-racism policy. Now, 5 families say that Albemarle County Public Schools forced, insert some scary music here, forced, dun dun dun, their children to learn critical race theory. The parents said lessons on race violated their First Amendment rights and their religious freedom by teaching about skin tone difference, because they're getting good at this. Every person is created equal in the eyes of God. So how do we teach? I'm sorry, white people just say wild stuff sometimes. So how do we teach kids to deal with racism when schools don't allow the discussion? You know, that's the kind of big picture question. But before we even get to that question, just how do you respond to these people saying that they're going to sue because they were forced to learn about race and skin tone difference when the law tells them they're not supposed to?
Yes. Well, I would say to you, Mark, that this is not the first time that we've seen those kinds of reactions. I mean, when we think about desegregation of schools, Brown versus Board of Education, which is not unproblematic. We also had issues where your parents came out and threatened to sue and had all kinds of ideologies about what education was supposed to be. But I think what we're constantly seeing over time is that we can't rely on schools to actually teach the truth about race politics and racialization. Although we, continue to struggle with schools for for the truth to be taught, that also requires the schools actually inform their curricula with an understanding of enslavement, colonialism, all the kinds of conversations that schools do not want to have.
But do we just give that ground up? Because I hear what you're saying, right? We want school. We're expecting school to teach people about racism and to help repair this stuff, and school ain't good at that for all the reasons, right? Schools are racist places still. But do we just give that ground up to these white parents that like take the race out, that make critical race theory a boogeyman? I mean, do we just say, you know what, forget it, we'll teach it at home? That feels like that can't be the whole answer also.
No, no, absolutely not. I think if our children are going to be in the space, there are schools where we're sending our children, we understand them as serving our communities, then we're going to have to also be in a struggle for the truth to be told, which is to say that the history has to be taught not from the perspective of the enslaver, but the perspective of the enslaved, not from the perspective of the master, the dominator, but those who have experienced the plunder on the underside. So I think we have to be engaged in the struggle.
Schools are still dealing with learning loss also. In addition to all this race stuff, after the pandemic, data from the National Assessment of Educational Progress, what we call NAEP, shows a drop in reading by 4 points and 9 points in math when compared to scores from 3 years ago. When I look at that kind of data, I keep thinking, all right, instead of fighting to keep race out, these parents should be fighting, if they really believe in justice for all and skin neutrality, they should be fighting to give access and resources so that these test scores and these learning outcomes and these reading abilities get equalized across the board. But they ain't worried about that. They too worried about running from critical race theory. It's a mess. Anyway, Dr. Elon Dancy, thanks for weighing in on this, man. We appreciate you.